Good morning, Sam Tenpenny with Tri-State Livestock News, the Fence Post, and Farmer and Rancher Exchange. Their Tuesday morning headlines concerning fair cattle markets. According to AgWeb, a mistrial has been declared by a federal judge in Denver overseeing the trial of 10 current and former chicken company executives facing the possibility of prison and million-dollar fines after being charged with price fixing and bid rigging from 2012 to early 2019. Jurors told U.S. District Judge Philip Brimmer on Thursday that they were deadlocked after a 7-week trial of men who had worked for U.S. chicken producers like Tyson Foods, Inc., Pilgrim's Pride Corporation, and Purdue Farms, LLC, failing to reach a verdict after almost 4 days of deliberations. The Justice Department had brought the suit, and the trial was the first after a year-long investigation into the $95 billion chicken market. The Denver jury was asked to decide whether the defendants agreed to coordinate pricing and bids to limit competition, but the jurors were not able to agree on a verdict even after Judge Brimmer on Wednesday instructed them to keep trying to work through their impasse. The judge set a retrial date in February after prosecutors said that they will go forward with the case, while each of the defendants face a single charge of conspiring to restrain trade. According to DTN, a pair of cabinet secretaries have written to the world's largest ocean carriers demanding that they treat U.S. ag exports fairly at West Coast ports and restore reciprocal treatment of imports and exports that is inherent in trade. Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg wrote the presidents and executives of a dozen major global shipping lines to relieve the supply chains and consider options of other ports beyond the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, California. The secretary cited unprecedented disruption to the flow of goods worldwide and the need for both government and industry to pull every lever and maximize the use of our existing infrastructure to relieve congestion and shipping disruptions. For more than a year now, global carriers have been delivering cargo containers to the U.S. ports, then returning with empty containers rather than shipping ag exports back to Asia, especially China. The shippers maintain that they get more money to deliver containers to Asian shippers that can be quickly flipped for exports back to the U.S., rather than having to deal with handling U.S. ag commodities. Dairy exporters thank the secretaries for their letter to call out profiteering by foreign-owned carriers after stating that supply chain problems had cost their industry alone at least $1.3 billion in the first 3 quarters of 2021. The secretary stated in their letter that restoring reciprocal treatment of products is critical, while shippers of U.S.-grown agricultural commodities and goods have seen reduced service, ever-changing return dates, and unfair fees as containers have short-circuited the usual pathways and been rushed to be exported empty, an imbalance, according to the secretaries, that is not sustainable and contributes to the logjam of empty containers clogging the ports. The secretaries have also highlighted that ocean carriers have suspended service to the Port of Oakland, which has caused agricultural exporters to truck their products to Los Angeles and Long Beach, which are already congested, adding that the poor service and refusal to serve customers when the empty containers are clearly available is unacceptable, and if not resolved quickly, may further require examination and action by the Federal Maritime Commission. Yet, after a year of complaints to the Federal Maritime Commission, the Commission has not been aggressive in dealing with the issue of empty containers. The Commission did create an advisory committee back in October, and the House passed a bill just last week, the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, that garnered wide bipartisan support that would give the Commission more ability to pressure shippers into filling containers rather than loading empty ones at the port. The North American Meat Institute said proposed rules to implement California's Proposition 12 animal confinement law remain flawed and that more time is needed for compliance despite modifications to the proposed rules. The California Department of Food and Agriculture, the agency that's tasked with developing rules to implement the law, announced modifications to Prop 12, and NAMI said that the changes do recognize some of the complexity of the pork supply chain, but they do not go far enough into the issues. They suggest rather than apply band-aids to address challenges, the CDFA should go further and afford everyone in the supply chain from the hog producers all the way down to food service and retail entities the 28-month preparation time that the law and the voters contemplated before enforcing any aspect of Prop 12 or its regulations. California voters approved Proposition 12 back in 2018. The law establishes specific minimum requirements for confinement for laying hens, breeding pigs, and veal calves beginning in 2022. So the deadline for producers to comply with the law is fast approaching, and 2 food manufacturers have said that they will comply with Prop 12 when it goes into force in January. David Ehart, Senior Director of Communications and Brand Marketing at Seaboard Foods, said that Seaboard will no longer sell certain whole pork products into California due to California's Proposition 12. Hormel Foods has assessed Proposition 12, and while it is still awaiting final clarity on specific details and rules, the company is preparing to fully comply when the law goes into effect on Jan 1. The company's Applegate portfolio of products already complies with Prop 12, but added that although they face no risk of material losses from compliance, the law will add complexity to the company's supply chain, including costs associated with compliance. Tri-State Livestock News reported that the House of Representatives passed a standalone cattle contract library bill introduced by South Dakota Congressman Dusty Johnson with a vote of 411 to 13 last week. The House also voted 418 to 9 to advance House Bill 5290, introduced by House Ag Committee Chairman David Scott, extending the authorization for livestock mandatory reporting through September 30th of 2022. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association cheered the House passage of both pieces of legislation, saying that they secured the introduction of the Johnson bill and that LMR is absolutely essential to fair, competitive, and transparent cattle markets. Iowa cattle feeder Eric Nelson calls the compromise bill a feel-good thing, saying that a friend of his who worked as a hog marketing agent in 2009 recently told him that the hog contracts library did not preserve the small hog producers, but rather hasten their decline. The industry is in agreement that the cash market has gotten too thin to accurately determine the value of market-ready cattle in a timely manner. The 5014 regulation would have required the bigger packers to purchase 50% of their needs on the cash or spot market and to take delivery within 14 days. The compromise bill would require USDA to implement a cattle contracts library, in-state regional cash trade minimums and maximums, inhibit packer confidentiality claims, which would increase reporting, require more timely reporting of cattle carcass weights, and require packers to report the next 14 days slaughter numbers. RCAF Region 3 Director Brett Kinsey said that with 10 sponsors on Grassley's 5014 bill and 5 sponsors on Fisher's original cattle contract library bill, it's curious why the industry dropped support for 5014, saying that this bill is not a true compromise with very little, if any, of the Grassley bill included, although several groups have voiced support for Fisher and Grassley Senate Bill 3229, known as the Cattle Market Compromise Bill. James Halverson, whose South Dakota Stock Growers Board of Directors voted 15 to 10 to support the bill, said that his group was not satisfied with the regional cash minimums offered in the bill and that they will continue to push for more, as well as more transparency, according to his group's policy. The Independent Beef Association of North Dakota also chose not to support the bill, stating their membership felt at this point there were too many loopholes, unanswered questions, that it will take too long to implement, and that giving more authority to USDA doesn't sound great. RCAF stated publicly that they did not support the bill after submitting to the sponsors 3 different memos, which included proposed amendments to the legislation. Kinsey said that the bill takes a snapshot at the last 18 months, the poorest in the history of the cattle business, and makes that the baseline, limiting the mandatory minimums of the best cash trade areas by tying them to the lowest cash trade areas, and that his greatest opposition lies not in the idea that it doesn't do enough or that it doesn't do enough quick enough, but that its greatest danger is in the precedent that it sets, fearful that if Congress deems regionalization to be legal, that it'll change the industry forever. The Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921 was enacted to protect members of the livestock, meat, and poultry industries from unfair, deceptive, unjustly discriminatory, and monopolistic practices. Kinsey fears if regionalization is enshrined in law by this bill, that we will once again have muddied the water, perhaps irreparably. The U.S. Cattlemen's Association voiced their immediate support for the bill, confident that the Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act will deliver on its promise to restore robust price discovery and provide market participants with the information they need to make savvy marketing decisions, and commend Senators Fisher, Grassley, Tester, and Wyden for coming together on a bipartisan solution that has broad support from both lawmakers and producer groups. The group's Vice President, Justin Tupper, said reforming the cattle marketplace to drive transparency and true price discovery is a core tenet of how we can strengthen the U.S. cattle producers' bottom line, and that they look forward to working with members of the Senate and House Agriculture Committees to quickly advance this bill. Tupper explained that it is crucial for the industry to gather around a bill that will pass and to work with legislators who have proven themselves to back the cattle industry. In response to those who might fear that if the compromise bill passes, the industry will not get the support that it needs on other issues, Tupper confirmed that this is of no concern, stating that when this passes is when the work begins, but we have to get something done. We can't shoot for the moon like we have for 25 years. We can't have an end-all be-all bill. It just won't happen. Until next time, I'm Sam Tenpenny, and this is your Fair Cattle Market Update.